I give you a truly national figure, the United States Congressman from Illinois, Ray LaHood.
Well, good noontime, everyone. Thank you for being here. And this is either my second or third time back at the City Club, and I enjoy doing it. Tom and I actually talked about me doing this maybe 6 months ago, and having no idea that we'd be facing some of the controversial things that we're facing today, and maybe 33 days before the election. I'm pleased that both my wife and daughter are here. My wife Kathy and my daughter Sarah are here. Kathy came to see her old boyfriend, Senator John Cullerton, because John, or maybe John came to see Kathy, I don't know. John and Kathy actually went to high school together at St. Francis High School in Wheaton, and we had to admonish John a little bit because Kathy and I attended her 40th high school class reunion last weekend, and we're not sure where John was. Oh, they don't allow him in DuPage County. John, thank you for coming today. Appreciate it very much. And Tom, thank you for inviting me. We might as well get right with it, I guess. Here we are, just a little more than a month. All right, get your tape recorder up here. This guy's with Copley, so I got to be nice to him. He covers two of my papers in my district, Peoria and Springfield. Look at this, just before this whole page thing broke, I'll sort of set up what I think some of us felt really. This is an off-year election, and our president's been in office now in his sixth year. And ordinarily in the sixth year, you think that the governing party, which we are, certainly faces tough times. But we sort of left with the idea that we would have an opportunity to hold on to the House and Senate. We currently have 232 members in the House and 55 members in the Senate with the President in the White House. But look, there's a lot of controversial issues, not the least of which is the war. In some parts of the country, immigration is a big issue. Certainly in Texas and in California and some of the border states, Arizona, it's a tough issue. And so during the last 45 days, we passed a lot of legislation having to do with border security. So members from those states could go back home and talk about the fact that we've added 1,500 Border Patrol, and that we've put troops on the border to back up the Border Patrol, and that we passed tough penalties on those employers that hire people that are illegal. And that gave people in those states the ammunition to talk about these issues when they went back home. Now look, the economy has never been better. Unemployment is very low. You see what the stock market has been doing. And so you think when the economy is good, people are going to reward those people in office. And the president's poll numbers have actually come up during the time that he gave, particularly as we commemorated the 5th anniversary of 9/11. The president gave 3 significant speeches, gave one on national television. That helped raise his poll numbers above 40%. And so I think all of us felt that we had a chance to hold on to the House, hold on to the Senate, and then of course this controversial issue with Mark Foley, who was elected in my class in 1994 and from Florida, involved with email exchange and email communication with the page. And look, there's 2 things that irritate the public. One is a politician who takes money, the way that Duke Cunningham did, who I sat next to on the Intelligence Committee for 6 years. He sat right next to me. He took $2.3 million in bribes. You know who was the guy that handled that? Denny Hastert handled it. He appointed Cunningham to the committee, just like he appointed me to the committee. He took care of it. And he also took care of the Tom DeLay situation. Tom DeLay was probably Denny Hastert's best friend in Congress. DeLay is the one that made Hastert Speaker. On the second day of impeachment, when Bob Livingston announced on the floor that he was not going to stand for Speaker, It was Tom DeLay who rounded up the votes to make Denny Speaker. So they were good friends. But when DeLay got in ethical problems, Hastert went to him and told him he had to leave the House. It was Bob Ney who got appointed to the House Administration Committee by Speaker Hastert. That's how you get that job. And when Ney got in trouble with Abramoff, Speaker Hastert went to him and told him he had to step down. This idea that somehow the Speaker is not capable of handling tough problems with members is nonsense. And that's where I go to my point. I think if Speaker Hastert had been better served by his staff, who knew about this, and they had taken this to him, he would have called Foley into his office, reprimanded him, and monitored the situation. I believe the Speaker when he says he didn't know about this, that he didn't know about the emails. I believe Denny Hastert. I've known him for 20 years. I served with him in the Illinois House, and he's been a good friend ever since. He's been a good speaker, and he's been able to handle tough ethical problems with members of Congress, not the least of which is his best friend DeLay, or Bob Ney, or Duke Cunningham. And I have no doubt he would have handled this had he known about it. I've suggested that we temporarily suspend the PAGE program. It's an antiquated program where we bring 15 and 16-year-old boys and girls to Washington, D.C. to work on the House floor. Now, it may have been a good program when it was started, but it is antiquated. And under the Democratic watch, it was flawed. Under the Democrats' watch, you had a gay congressman from Massachusetts who was convicted and found guilty by the Ethics Committee of having sex with a boy Page. He got reelected. We also had an Illinois congressman at the same time who was found guilty of having sex with a girl Page. He didn't win re-election. That was Dan Crane. So the program has been flawed. And to put it any other way is just not accurate. And to have 15 and 16-year-old boys and girls coming to Washington, working on the House floor, probably is a system that needs to be evaluated. So I say let's suspend the program. Let's have some outside scholars come in, look at the program, see if it makes sense, see if we need to make changes, and see if we really need to have the program. And I've suggested that. I've talked to the Speaker about it. But look, when you're Speaker of the House, you have responsibility. The PAGE program is his responsibility. And so that's the reason that he's taking all the heat for this. And so how it plays out here in the next 30 days is, I guess, the $64 billion question. We talk in billions in Washington. We don't talk in millions anymore. So it is the $64 billion question, and I don't know how it's going to play out. The Democrats, and I'll give Rahm Emanuel his due on this. He's probably done as good a job as anybody that's been in charge of the DCCC since I've been in Washington. He's recruited good candidates. He's funded them. He's given them good issues to talk about. And we have 3 very important races right here in Illinois for Congress. The Melissa Bean race is the #1 race for the Democrats. They want to hold on to that. That's a 65% Republican district, once held by Phil Crane. We have a good candidate there. He's worked very hard, but obviously now he has to answer questions about Hastert and about the PAGE program. We have a very important race going on in the seat that Henry Hyde is vacating. And that seat is a Republican seat. The president carried it twice. So, and Peter Roskam has put together a good organization. That really is the seat, that's the poster child for the war. You all know that Tammy Duckworth is a war hero. No question about that. She is. Double amputee, made great sacrifice for her country, came back here, wanted to run for Congress, and she's doing that. And obviously she's against the war, against our going in there, and that's what that race is about. Over in the western part of the state where Lane Evans has given up his seat because of illness, we have a candidate there. So we've got 3, and his assistant is running, so we've got 3 very important races going on. I will tell you this, for those of us in Illinois, if we lose the majority, obviously we lose Denny Hastert as Speaker, and I can tell you nobody's done more for our state than Denny Hastert. You can talk to anybody in this state, from governor to any legislator, when there's a problem, when we need a Medicare fix, when we need a Medicaid fix, when we need more money for hospitals, when we need more money for infrastructure, whether it's in the city of Chicago, Cook County, or out where Denny lives, he steps up and does it. He's been a great speaker for our state. He's done the heavy lifting to help all of us in Illinois, all the citizens of Illinois. So for us personally, in our state, there's a lot at stake here with the majority party, whether we hold it or whether we don't hold it. Because we have the Speaker of the House, the #1 guy in the House from our own state, who's done a lot for our state. He's been an incredible leader. And so, to me, that's what's at stake in the election. Unfortunately, now all of it's overshadowed by the controversy over the Page program. And, you know, ultimately the people will decide these things. And so we will see what happens. Obviously, we can't, you know, there's not a lot of value, I guess, in talking about many other issues, but I'll be happy to talk about any issues that anybody wants to talk about. But that's sort of how I see the landscape. The truth is nobody really knows who the majority party is going to be in Washington 30 days from now. And some of it's going to get played out over the next 30 days on how people respond to this and how people respond to the controversy and how people respond in Illinois, given the fact that the speaker is from our state, that this is his program, and this is part of a big controversy that he has to shoulder. As we speak right now, as we're meeting right now, he's having a press conference, and I have no idea what he's saying. These folks maybe from the media will get a phone call here pretty soon to tell us what he said. But these folks that think, particularly Democrats who think Speaker Hastert should step down, I say that's a lot of political talk. He shouldn't step down. There's no reason for him to step down. I go back to what I said before. When he's been challenged with ethical problems against members of Congress in our party, he's handled it. So, what's it say, Ray?
Louis Freeh's going to lead the ethics investigation, former FBI director.
Is that what the speaker said today?
Louis Freeh's going to head
Louis Freeh, who's a former FBI director under President Clinton. Does it say anything else?
He'll oversee the investigation of the House Page program. That's all it says.
Okay. Well, look, I'm happy to talk about any issues you want to talk about, but I think obviously you all came here, I mean, to hear about what's going on, and that's my take on it. And if I just want to open the mic here. If anybody has questions, please step to the mic. Please.
Hello, Congressman. As you know, I'm Joyce Saxon. I'm on the governing board of City Club. What do you know about this guy who blew the whistle, who resigned his job and then said that he had talked to key people 3 years ago about Congressman Foley? What do you know about him? What was his motive?
You know, frankly, I don't know him. If he walked in the room, I wouldn't know who he is. I wouldn't recognize him. I don't know him. He worked for Congressman Foley for 10 years, and he worked for Congressman Reynolds, who's the chairman of the opposite committee of Rahm. He's the chairman of our Republican campaign committee, and he worked for Congressman Reynolds, who's from New York, for a couple of years. So,
You have no idea why he did this?
why he left his post?
Why he made this announcement, leaving his post and making this announcement?
I think that probably maybe some people in his office maybe were blaming him for something, and I think he wanted to set the record straight. Yeah, I don't know. I'm just speculating on that.
Before you start, let me just ask a question. Not that you shouldn't be concerned about the pages, but this country has other questions. The Wall Street Journal the other day editorially gave the House Republicans a mixed review, said that they hadn't done what the Wall Street Journal thought they should do, for example, make the tax cuts permanent, failed in a number of other areas. Do you feel that that the House majority is so lacking a kind of a cohesion that it's difficult to manage?
Look, I saw the Wall Street Journal editorial, and frankly, I mean, they were talking about the Senate. They weren't talking about the House. We've passed tax extenders. We've made permanent the estate tax relief. We've passed border control. We've passed immigration control. You name the issue, and we've dealt with it in the House of Representatives. It's the Senate that can't deal with these things. But look we are the majority party. When you get to be the majority party, I guess you get painted with the same brush as everybody in Washington, D.C. And, that's why when the president's down in the polls over the war, we all get painted with that. But the House of Representatives have done a lot of good work. You name the issue, and I guarantee you, we've passed it. Immigration. Border security. We've dealt with a lot of tough issues. We haven't ducked any issues. And the Senate just simply has not, they move much slower, and they take their time on these things. So I don't agree with the Wall Street Journal when they say we've been a do-nothing Congress. I think part of the Congress has been do-nothing, but I certainly don't think the House has been.
Marty Gleason, City Club member, Democrat, and Tom Roser will be happy to attest. And the question I have is a broader and larger one, and in the future. The question I have is, suppose we come on another election like 2000, when the popular vote winner doesn't win in the Electoral College. And suppose that winner, whatever party, may be African American, Hispanic, and or a woman. Do you think the country and that candidate would go along as magnanimous a way as Al Gore and the American public did? Would they be as accepting, or would there be serious unrest in the population with that kind of an outcome?
One of the things that we did after the 2000 election is pass some very significant federal laws to correct some of the problems that have occurred particularly in Florida and other states. And we've given some money to the states so that counties could buy new equipment, so that voting machines that are outdated could be updated, so that there would be opportunities that people, we created provisional voting, for example, that if you walk in the polling place and you announce you're there and they say we don't have you registered, you're allowed to vote, and then they go back and check to find out what the problem was. Or we even have early voting now, where you can go to the polls 20 days before the election, or go to your county clerk or somewhere, your precinct, if they have the machine set up, and you can vote. So we've tried to correct some of these problems. Part of the
I'm talking about national popular vote versus the Electoral College.
Well, okay, I got your point on that. I have co-sponsored and sponsored a bill to eliminate the Electoral College, which I think is outdated and outmoded and does not reflect the kind of elections that we have in this country today. But it'll never pass. It'll take a constitutional amendment, which means 290 votes in the House, 67 votes in the Senate, and 38 states to pass it. It's not going to happen, because the small states that are represented in the United States Senate, those 2 senators from each of those small states, will never pass a constitutional amendment, because they have clout under the Electoral College system. So as much as I'd like to see Electoral College system reform, which I think is totally antiquated, and I've introduced bills to have a constitutional amendment, it's not going to happen. The small states aren't going to let it happen.
What about the interstate compact that is being discussed?
I don't know about that. What is that?
Well, where enough states would agree with an interstate compact to support the popular vote winner, wouldn't require a constitutional amendment.
Mm-hmm.
It's in
I don't know.
The Illinois House and the Senate.
Schwarzenegger just vetoed it in California.
I guess Schwarzenegger just vetoed it. But you know what? To be honest with you, I don't know enough about that to talk intelligently. But I do think the Electoral College system is antiquated. Yes, ma'am.
Congressman, just one more question about the pages. Because you're closer to the situation than we are, did you by any chance hear which of the Speaker's staff members this chief of staff who just resigned gave the information to?
Well,
was
he said he
was
gave
it
it
Mike
to
Stockey, or was it somebody else?
He said he gave it to Scott Palmer, the Speaker's
Okay.
chief of staff.
Okay.
Now, Scott Palmer put out a one-sentence statement last night saying that it's not true.
Okay.
But Stokey had been informed about it, and he referred it to the clerk's office.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
I think, look, I go back to what I said before. I'm a former staffer. I worked for 2 congressmen. If somebody had brought that information to me, I would have immediately because it involves a member, and it involves a page, a teenager, I would have immediately taken it to either one of the members that I worked for and disclosed it and told him, you got to get this guy in here and talk to him. And that's, look, I've been unvarnished about this. The speaker's staff let him down. There's no question about it. Whoever it was, whether it was Palmer or Stokey or Vandermeet, I know all these guys.
Yeah.
I've worked with them for
Yeah.
years. They did him a disservice.
Right.
And when you look at Hastert's track record on dealing with ethically challenged members, he's done the job. DeLay, Ney, Cunningham.
Cunningham, yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm going to change the subject,
Good.
Congressman. Could you tell us about your trip to Lebanon and what your observations were and where the
Eileen, why don't
funding
you,
might...
before I do that, why don't you tell all these folks where you're launching your new career?
Oh, thank you.
Introduce yourself and...
I'm Eileen Makovich, and I'll be based in Washington, reporting to Congressman LaHood and to Senator Durbin and to Ray Holzer, a Lincoln scholar, and directing the Abraham Lincoln Bicentennial Commission.
We just stole her away from Washington. It's a great opportunity, a great job.
I'm very excited. I truly am.
Yeah.
I'd like it if you would talk to us a little bit about your observations of Lebanon and the tremendous job of reconstruction that will be going on there.
Well, look, Lebanon is in very bad shape. I was there a month ago. My wife and I have been there on at least 11 different occasions, and I just made my 12th trip about a month ago. I went with 2 other members of Congress. And Lebanon has been destroyed. Their economy's been destroyed. The bombing in the southern part where Hezbollah is has just ruined tourism. There were 25,000 tourists in Beirut on the day the bombing started. Thank God, through our government and cruise ships and others, all of those people were able to come back to the United States or go back to the countries from which they came, and they all went safely. And I appreciate what our government did on that. Our visit there was really to tell the Prime Minister, who's an extraordinarily gifted fellow, that we support him. On her first trip to the Middle East after that bombing, Condoleezza Rice went to Lebanon. She visited with the Prime Minister. There's a group over there now. They have a good Prime Minister. They have a very weak president who's tied very closely to Syria. It's a very fragile democracy, very fragile. I've had the privilege of meeting a number of members of parliament there. They're good people. Beirut and Lebanon is caught in an area of the world where they've been used by a lot of different people, a lot of different countries. Syria, not the least of which, and certainly Iran through Hezbollah's influence in the south. It'll take billions of dollars to rebuild southern Lebanon. A lot of innocent people are out of their homes, their children are out of their schools, hospitals are closed and destroyed, and the Prime Minister, Signora, has been able to raise almost $1 billion. We've committed 230 to the effort, and so it's going to take a long time. If you had a chance to go to Lebanon, what you would find is it's the hospitality capital of the world. The people there are wonderful people. My grandparents on my father's side came from what was then Syria to the United States in 1895. How they ended up in Peoria, I was telling, I'm not sure how, I was telling these folks here, you know, sometimes they ask you a question, if you could go back and meet somebody, who would it be? It would be my grandfather. It took him 3 months. And we think my grandmother was on the same ship, 3 months to get from departing from that part of the world to get to New York. They came through Ellis Island and ended up in Peoria in 1895. And you know, like a lot of immigrants, didn't speak one word of English, played by the rules, worked hard, and ended up becoming citizens of our country.
Congressman, let me ask you a question. Since you have criticized Speaker Hastert's staff, would you, if you were with him, tell him that a staff change is needed from top to bottom in his office?
Look, you know, I'm not going to get into this thing about telling, you know, the speaker who he should and should not have. That's up to him. That's up to all of us. I mean, you know, we have people that work for us, and you know, he has to make those decisions about people who are working for him. And you know, I'll let him decide who he wants and who he doesn't want.
Secondly, there has been some concern on the part of some of the more conservative people, not me, that the House, the Republicans in the House have not sufficiently cut spending and have sort of spent the moon. Do you have any kind of reply on that, sir?
Well, look, I know there are conservatives who think that we've spent a lot of money, and we have spent a lot of money. When I went to Washington in 1994, the debt was $3.2 trillion. Today it's over $8 trillion. But, you know, I'm going to tell you this. We've spent $18 billion in Afghanistan, and we brought down al-Qaeda. We're spending $10 billion in Iraq. Whether you agree with the war or not, that is the way it is. We've spent $500 billion there. In part, that's what this election will be about. Whether we should be there, the cost. When 9/11 happened, I believe President Bush was committed to really reining in federal spending. Since 9/11, we gave every citizen who lost a family member in New York a minimum of $1 million. That cost our government between $20 and $40 billion. So every first responder who lost a family member got a minimum of $1 million. Many families got much more than that. We set up all of these security systems in every airport in the country that didn't exist before 9/11. All taxpayer dollar. A lot of this stuff was declared an emergency and piled on the debt. Obviously, we wish we could have paid for some of this, but we had to secure the airports. You know what was happening all over the country. Our economy was shutting down because people weren't flying, restaurants weren't open. The airport in Washington, D.C. was closed for 6 months. Think of what the economy was doing in Washington, D.C. during that period. So we secured every airport. We hired all these TSA people, put all this equipment in airports, and you know what? Airplanes are full now. You know why? Because people think flying is safe. Because of everything that we've done. We've spent a lot of money. We created joint terrorism task forces, one of which is in Chicago, where all the law enforcement people get together every day and talk to one another. We've hired 2,500 new CIA agents and 2,500 new FBI agents, and they're doing good work. And the proof of it is, our country hasn't been attacked since 9/11. Now that's not an accident. I give the President his credit on that, and I give Congress credit on that. It's not an accident. We've secured our country. That's not to say we're not going to be attacked, but we've arrested people in this country through good law enforcement and intelligence work who came here to Buffalo, New York or Portland, Oregon for no other reason than to hurt Americans. So we've done a lot of good, but it's been very costly. And we've piled a lot of debt on. And I think when those of us who are in these positions of responsibility feel like the country is safe, which I think the country is certainly a lot safer than it was before 9/11, and that law enforcement people are working together, and that people can get on airplanes without fear of, having it hijacked. We need to work on the debt. There's no question about it. When I ran in 94, I was one of 3 members on the Republican side who didn't sign the contract with America because I said we ought to pay the debt down before we pile more debt on and before we give tax cuts. That was not popular, and I didn't endear myself to many of my colleagues. I'm concerned about the debt for my own children and grandchildren and for our country. But we got to keep America safe. And we've done some of that. We also have to pay attention to the debt, too. The debt is not because of tax cuts. With all due respect to my friends on the Democratic side, we don't have an $8 trillion debt because we passed a few tax dollars back to our citizens. We have an $8 trillion debt because we brought down al-Qaeda, because we established a democracy in Afghanistan, established a democracy in Iraq. We've secured our own country by securing all the airports and securing communities like Chicago, Illinois, so that people feel safe. That's why we have the debt. And eventually those of us in these positions are going to have to start worrying about the debt. And we should.
Somehow I get fated to ask liberal questions, but I will. The critics of the war on both right and left say that there is no exit strategy, that we're there just to continue to be there throughout the entire time, that this whole thing about continue and stay the course is evidence of a bankruptcy, that Iraq is a failure, that Rumsfeld should have sent more troops in, that Rumsfeld should resign. Would you comment on that?
Well, first of all, no member of Congress is going to decide who the Secretary of Defense is. That's up to the President. If the President thinks Rumsfeld's doing a good job, Rumsfeld's going to stay. And I've supported, I'm on the Intelligence Committee. I'm in my 8th year. This is my last year because we're term limited. I believe there were weapons of mass destruction. And I'm sorry that there weren't, because I thought there were, like a lot of people in Washington. But I'm not sorry we brought down Saddam. 12 million people went to the polls. 70% of the people voted. It'd be quite incredible if 70% of the people in this country voted, wouldn't it? In the primary, 17% of the people voted. But 70% of the people voted. They voted for their own leaders. I've been over there. I've met the leadership of the country. I think they're good leaders. I think they're doing the best they can. None of us had any idea that this insurgency, this opportunity for Iran to bring people in and out of the country was going to continue the kind of violence that has gone on there. I think a lot of us felt we were going to go in, bring down Saddam, help the people establish a government, and that we could be out of there pretty quickly. It hadn't quite worked that way, and it has cost a lot of money, and it is going to be a big issue in this election. It was a big issue in the last election, and the president won. That's what the last election was about. It was about the war. Not only the war on terror, but the war in Iraq. And I think this election will be the same. And, the idea that we're going to send a signal to our enemy about when we're leaving or how many people are going to be there, it's not going to happen under this president. It simply is not. I've been in the presence of the president many times when he's talked about the war. And he's committed to staying there as long as we need to be there to stabilize the country. Now, Kathy and I have our son Sam, who's in Baghdad. He's been there for over a year. He works for the State Department. He works with the media, and he's traveled around the country. What he tells us is that there's 18 provinces in Iraq. 2 of them are where all the insurgency has taken place and where all the media is. If you go out, for example, if you go up to Kurdistan, what he says is it's like a normal city. It's like Peoria. Kids are going to school, people are working, businesses are open. You go to 16 provinces of Iraq and it's pretty peaceful. You come to Baghdad and the surrounding area and there's a lot of turmoil and there's a lot of insurgency and some of our troops are being killed and innocent Iraqis are being killed. But I think we'll stay there and do the job until the job gets done to bring about peace and stability. You're not going to read about all the good things that go on in 16 other provinces. You're just not. It's not the way it works. It's not a good headline grabber, so to speak. Peace breaks out in Kurdistan. Doesn't exactly resonate. So, and almost all the media are in Baghdad. So, look, this is tough. When we have almost 3,000 of our men and women who lose their lives, it's tough sledding. And all the Iraqis that have been killed. So, we'll see how the election plays out. I believe if the Democrats win the majority in the House and Senate, they'll try and bring about changes in what we're doing.
Good afternoon, Representative LaHood. Sorry. I was wondering why you would refer to the PAGE program as antiquated. Why would it have been more appropriate as a program in bygone days as opposed to now?
Well, it was started over 100 years ago. And to be honest with you, what these pages are little errand boys and little errand girls. They run errands for us. We have staff. If we need errands run for us, we could have our staff do it. They deliver envelopes and flags and deliver messages to people. And to me, maybe that worked in the old days when members didn't have as many staff people. When my predecessor first got elected in 1956, he got 1 staffer. I get 18. I get up to 18. In the Senate, you get up to 32. Why we need 15 and 16-year-old boys, girls, running around Capitol Hill delivering envelopes and flags is beyond me. I know it's a great experience for them to come to the House floor, to see the Speaker of the House, to watch the President walk down the middle aisle. That is a great experience. But it's an antiquated system, and it's a flawed system. I don't care how many safeguards were put in place. When you can have a member of Congress who all of these pages look up to us, they look up to us. They think we're important people. When you can have a member of Congress sending these salacious emails to a 15 or 16-year-old boy or girl, it's wrong. Or you have a gay member of Congress having sex with a boy, that's wrong. Or you have a member of Congress having sex with a 16-year-old girl. It was flawed in the 80s. It's flawed today. We ought to fix it. We ought to, listen, if one of my children was in the PAGE program, they'd be in Peoria today. They wouldn't be in Washington. That's why it's antiquated. You look at what they do. Very little. They're not doing substantial work. They're not doing legislative research.
But to say that it's antiquated, does that mean in bygone days, children, or pages at least, were less at threat of being molested or, in some form or another by congressmen? Look,
How do I know the answer to that question? I've been in Congress 12 years. I've been in politics 30 years. I've worked in Congress for 29 and a half years. I don't know the answer to your question. I know this. If the program is there for pages to help members of Congress deliver envelopes and flags, it's antiquated. I got 18 staff people I can ask to do that. I don't need a 15 or 16-year-old boy or girl to deliver an envelope or a flag, or to hand me a message on the House floor from one of my staffers in my office that they want me to call them.
Okay, next question.
Can I ask another? Do you mind?
I don't know, he's in charge.
I'm telling you, this is not a colloquy. This is where you ask a question, he gets the answer, and you can talk to him later. We don't continue a conversation. Thank you.
All right, appreciate it.
Mr. Hood?
Congressman, hello. Bill Hood, club member, and I work for American Airlines. So I'll spare you my thoughts about the Transportation Security Administration. I'd like to know...
You probably feel the same about it.
Well, we all get to experience it a lot. So my question is a totally different subject. You touched on it briefly. And since we're in a state that doesn't figure much in the immigration debate, I'd like to know your thoughts on it. And you correctly pointed out that the only two terrorist threats that we've had coming over the border have both come from Canada.
They did.
It's the east and the west, and yet we're building a wall across the state of Arizona supposedly to stop the terrorist threat from coming in, which strikes me as being not the real reason.
Yeah, there is a little bit of, I take your point, and I think it's a good point, but there is a little bit of a threat from South America, from some people who do come from South America through the Mexican border. We have not, we really haven't intercepted, but there are people that are coming from South America who cause a little bit of a threat. Certainly not the threat that the people that have come over to Buffalo or to Portland from Canada, and that's the way they did come in, no question about it. I favor a very comprehensive approach. I favor the approach that the President's talked about. I think the idea that you're going to send 12 to 14 million people back to where they came is nonsense. We're not going to do it, and we shouldn't do it. Look, there are a lot of these people that are working in the agricultural industry, the landscaping industry, the service industry. If you get in a cab today, it won't be driven by a white male in this city. It'll be driven by somebody who's from another country. And that's true in every major city. You go to Arizona, California, Texas, you see who's picking fruits and vegetables, who's working in the hotels, who's doing the landscaping work. It's not Americans. I have a meatpacking plant in my district in Beardstown, Illinois. They slaughter 6,000 hogs a day. They employ 2,200 people, of which 40% are Hispanic. You know why? Because people in Beardstown don't want those jobs. They're hard jobs. They're good paying jobs. They have good benefits, but people don't want them. The reason that 14 million people are here in this country, almost all of them working, almost all of them good family people, almost all of them sending the money back either to their families or supporting their families, obeying the laws of this country, is because they want a good paying job. And there aren't Americans in this country that want those jobs. Now, this is not very popular in the quarters that I hang out in, but I support what the President says. I support the bill that the Senate passed. I believe if we're the majority party after the election, we will take up comprehensive immigration reform. We've done all the border security. We've built all the fences. We've put all the border patrol. We've done all that. Now we have to take care of the 12 to 14 million that are in this country, a lot of them illegal, a lot of them not paying taxes. And remember this, folks, for every illegal that's here working, there's an employer on the other side.
Yes, ma'am.
I just thought I'd give a comment on a happier subject closer
Good.
to the congressman's
Can you
heart.
make it in the form of a question? Make the comment and say, isn't that right?
All right. Congressman, I was very fortunate to visit Lebanon and see Baalbek and Beirut before the Civil War in the late 60s. And I just want to endorse your second your view about what a beautiful country it is. And it was like Paris on the Mediterranean. And I urge everyone here to visit Lebanon as soon as the political situation stabilizes. Isn't that right?
Absolutely. Listen, I go back to what I said before. Beirut and Lebanon is the hospitality capital of the world. They have great food, wonderful people. They love beautiful climate right on the Mediterranean. They love America.
It was the banking center of
It still is a banking center.
The reason I ask you tough questions, Congressman, isn't because I agree with the questions, but you're so good at answering them. One of the questions that I would like to ask you is the Woodward book, which said that the White House was torn and is torn with dissent between trying to let Rumsfeld leave or keeping him. You deal with the White House and the president frequently. Is this an unnatural situation, torn by chaos and dissent, which jeopardizes our security?
You know, look at this. In the last 6 years, the White House and the president have dealt with some of the most controversial issues in history. Certainly war and peace, and some of these other issues, the attack on 9/11, the war on terror. I mean, you just name them. So look, there are going to be differences of opinion. It's true of any White House. I think this White House has been pretty disciplined. I think it's pretty much a closed shop in the sense that, you know, there's a handful of people around the president who make these decisions and help him make decisions. And but, you know, I have a fellow that lives in my district named General Wayne Downing. You may have seen him on MSNBC. He's a military consultant for MSNBC. I just saw him the other night at a fundraiser for Dave Leach. He's quoted in the book, and he said, and he called Woodward. He said what his statements that Woodward attributed to him are absolutely false. So you look at Woodward's he's a very good journalist. I think probably a lot in the book is accurate. Whether it's accurate to say that the White House is torn and confused and, you know, it's in disarray, I've never really heard that kind of description of it in the past. But Bob Woodward he's a respected journalist, and probably half of what's in there is right, and the other half is speculation. So, yes, sir.
Yes, I'm Rick Harnish. I'm with the Midwest High Speed Rail Association. You challenged us to come up with an issue that the House hasn't dealt with, and all of our economic competitors have figured out how to expand and grow their rail networks in order to lower costs, make places like Peoria much more attractive places to live, and yet the House still hasn't done anything to figure out how to make our passenger rail network grow. What do you think about that?
Well, what I think about it is we don't have a nationalized system, first of all. We rely on Amtrak, which is a private business, and we fund Amtrak. We give them 40% of their budget. I support Amtrak. I support the idea that you have to have a comprehensive rail system, and it can't be just, you know, commercial rail. We have to have a system, particularly when you look at the Northeast Corridor. It's absolutely vital that you have a good Amtrak system. In our own state, you go to Bloomington, Macomb, Galesburg, any of these communities that have colleges, they rely heavily on Amtrak for students to get from the suburbs in Chicago back and forth, Southern Illinois University. I don't think we really have ignored passenger service. You know, there's some in Congress that want to eliminate all the subsidy for Amtrak. I don't. We need a good rail passenger service in this country. If we're going to put all this money into highways and put all the money into the rivers, which I support. I have the Illinois River in 200 miles of my district, and I support making sure that we have a good waterways for the delivery of corn and other agricultural products. We need to have a good passenger rail service. We simply do. And that's why I've always supported the idea that if Amtrak is well-run and well-managed, which is a big debate that goes on in Washington every year, that we ought to be subsidizing. And we are. 40% of their budget comes from the taxpayers of America. And I think that's a good thing.
Thank you.
Finally, the last curveball I'll throw you, and it is simply this. You said in your earlier remarks that we were surprised at the level of insurgency, the level of resistance from the insurgency. Why were we surprised? Why didn't we study it in the White House and in the State Department and the Defense Department, and why were we surprised?
Well, look, and I think when the chapters in the books are written on this war, that will be the one thing that people will probably have a legitimate criticism about. The fact is that there was no real long-range planning and no real scholarly thinking about the country that and the government, the leader that we were bringing down and the people that live there and the region and the differences and how significant the religion plays in these countries. It is the dominant thinking of the people in Iran, in Iraq, in Afghanistan, in Lebanon. It dominates. You know, the government that was set up in Lebanon is set up along religious lines. The president has to be Maronite. The Speaker of the House has to be, I think, a Sunni Muslim, and the Prime Minister has to be a Shiite. And that's the way Iraq was established. Same thing. Is that a good thing to do? What it's based on is religion and religious beliefs. That's the thing that we totally miscalculated. How much religion and how much the influence of religion has played in the history of these countries. And it's caused us a lot of problems. And I believe if there's any criticism of what we've done is that we did not think through very clearly what was going to happen after we brought down Saddam and how we were going to overcome the insurgency and how we were going to bring Shiites and Sunnis and other groups together. The reason that Kurdistan is a peaceful place is because they're all together. You know, they'd love to have their own separate country if they could. That's not going to happen. But they're all of one belief, so to speak. And that's, we miss the mark on that. She gets the last question?
Yes, ma'am. Yeah.
Congressman, Congress 2 years ago had asked the Institute of Medicine in Washington to give them a report on the future of EMS in the healthcare system. That report came out about a month ago. The report indicates that EMS, emergency medical service, is so fragmented that the future of EMS should only survive about 2 years before it falls apart completely, because the federal government is not giving any resources to EMS. It really needs to be a third service separate from fire or police, because it is medical. There is no leadership at the national level for a medical director. How do you feel about this?
To be honest with you, I don't know enough about it. It's, obviously something I can look into. You know a lot more about it than I do, and I'm sorry I can't be more specific, but I'm just, I'm probably a little bit in the dark on that. So, sorry I can't be more specific about it. Is that it? Thank you all very much.
Whether you're Republicans or Democrats, I wonder how many would agree with me as I was standing here listening to this very candid, bright man answer questions. I'm so sorry he didn't run for governor. Do you agree? Thank you very much. Meeting adjourned.